Whenever I fly, I always think about how amazing it is that I get to see the Earth from this altitude. This was a flight to Munich on my way back to the US after leading a painting retreat in Sicily. Stay tuned for news about my next painting retreat coming out really soon. Because we paint in reverse from light to dark, we always have to think about the light that we are preserving as we paint. And this subject today is a good example of that. So this is where we're going, and I'm going to walk you through these steps. So the first thing I do is lay out a little drawing to give me an idea of the perspective of the scene and where I want the clouds to be. As I typically do, I wet down the back of the paper and the front, and I lay it down on my surface. And I'm laying in some light color for the clouds. I'm not going to leave them as the light of the paper. I am going to take away a little bit of that tone. So I'm dropping in a little bit of lavender, some light areas for the clouds, and then I'm going to move up here and go ahead and paint the top sky area. And for that, I'm just using some Cobalt Blue, some Cerulean. And now as I move down the paper, I need to lay in some earth tones for the ground and be sure that I'm painting around the clouds, which are really a key feature of this painting. And some of these are softer in the background. I really wanted this prominent cloud here and some more prominent clouds down here. And I worked my way down the scene, and I wanted to stop things right about here. Okay, so this is all the light within the scene. I started up here painting the sky. I came down here and painted the ground. And what I'm doing when I paint this area is I'm looking at the reference photo and I'm asking myself, what are the lightest colors that I see on the ground? Well, it's a little bit of, light earth tone that still has some blue into it. And as I move further down the painting, I'm adding more saturation when we get into this main area down here. By using warmer colors and more defined edges, we are bringing this area closer to us and letting the background rest in the background. But while this is still damp, I want to get some soft shadows onto the ground. So I'm using some neutral tint, more cobalt blue in the mixture, and I'm painting some of these soft cloud shapes right now while the paper is still damp. I know I need a little bit more information about the horizon, so I go up here and paint a little bit more blue across the top of that, soften that up, and then as I work down the painting, I'm continuing to paint around the areas of light. Look at your reference photo and squint. That removes some information as far as like texture, and it dulls the color information. What is it that makes this scene work? And those things are easier to see when we squint and look at a reference photo. So I'm not trying to paint every little street, every bit of detail. I'm trying to really abstract and be as loose as I can, knowing that there are some ways that we can get some details back into the scene that I'm going to get to in a minute. And leaving more information down at the bottom here where it's closer to us, less information further back, trying to keep the distance nice and soft. Adding a little bit more dark for some of the clouds, and just taking my time, adding in more values, still taking advantage of softness. As I paint more on the paper, it is still damp. I can still work into it and get soft edges. Adding a little bit more detail in this area. Now, the cloud needs a little bit more form, and I want to add some darker value on the side and the bottom. So I'm connecting that bit with the shadows that I just painted underneath the cloud and pulling some of that up into the cloud and softening. And that's what it looks like at this point. Now it's an exciting time in the process. This is when we get to look at and add some of the details. I'm thinking about the darks of the scene, the little highlights that I'm going to get back with some gouache. I thought it was amazing what happens when I start to add in little bits of shadow, little bits of detail. We can assume there are some buildings, there are some trees that are casting shadows, and there's more information down there, just with a few little suggestions with these brush marks. When I do this, I like to start with this main area of interest and then work my way around the scene. If I was to start in the back of the painting and look at those details and add those in and work my way forward, the painting would become very overworked. So I'm adding in the details at the most prominent, the most important area of the painting first, and then I can see how that area relates to the rest of the painting. Now I'm using some gouache to get in some highlights into the scene. So light was catching some roads, some reflections on buildings, little things like that that I would never want to try and paint around. Some artists like to use masking fluid. I don't use masking fluid. I like to paint it and then come back in with some opaque gouache to get those little bits of highlights. And the gouache I'm using here is some Holbein ivory white gouache. You want to load up a lot on the tip of your brush and use a good amount of it. I'm not really dry brushing with it. I want to have a good thick amount of it on the tip of my brush and apply it directly that way. I try to not fiddle with it a whole lot, just lay it down and leave it. That's when it tends to look the best. I'm always amazed though when you get a little bit of detail, how it starts to bring the scene together. Having those highlights, having some darks and more information down there in that part of the painting. You know, this is what it looked like just a minute ago. When we start to add in some of the details, then it really brings the scene together and it starts to read like it should. It brings the foreground closer to us and gives it more of a feeling of importance. Now, once I did that, I loaded my brush up with some raw sienna. I felt like adding a little bit more saturation here down in the foreground and the middle ground in this important area of the painting would really bring a feeling of finish to the scene. By adding a little bit more color here, we're focusing this area, allowing it to feel closer to us. Now, the painting was pretty good, I felt like at this point, but I did feel the need to strengthen the sky one more time. So I did one more wash with thick cobalt blue and some cerulean up at the top of the sky, and now I'm using some water to soften the bottom of that. Here is a look at the final painting. This was really fun. It was a unique subject. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. The fun part is always to give it a try and see what it can turn into. If you want to learn more about the way that I paint, you feel like you're stuck or just want to brush up on a new way of doing this, take a look at this. Have you ever been really excited about a painting and you get all set up, you find that right reference that you're excited about, and then it's time to go and you feel lost? I have a free resource that I want to give to you today that can help with these problems. My 5 steps to plan a successful watercolor painting. I walk you through the crucial planning phase of your painting that will help you understand what you're going to paint first, second, and third. The planning is really so important, especially in watercolor. This medium is harder to correct. It's so immediate. So having that plan is very important. I send you a PDF that you can download. And the great thing about this is you can have it on your phone. You could print it out. You can download this right now before you start your next painting. All you have to do is follow this link here and download my 5-step guide to planning a successful watercolor painting.